Hi, Lucy. It's Laura. Can you turn the live stream on by chance?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, bye.
Good afternoon and welcome to Grief Support Group. This is a time for folks who are experiencing grief of whatever sort to gather together virtually. We're not in the same space, but we can know that we are all doing this at the same time, or perhaps in the same spiritual space. And to spend a little time to intentionally learn about, think about, reflect on the grief journey that you're going through right now. I'm Laura Stone, and I'm streaming from the chapel. This is one of the activities that we won't open up right away because of the intimate nature of it. I think here pretty soon, once we get more activities going, we may have once a month where we meet in person, and the other times we may continue to do the recording as we have been. If you have feedback on that, on what would be helpful for you, feel free to let me know. And in the meantime, for today, I invite you to find a comfortable space wherever you are, a comfortable posture. Maybe you want to have a journal nearby, or a notebook or some paper, something to write with. You might want to have some tissues or a glass of water nearby. We will spend some time continuing to go through the book. It's called A Time to Grieve by Kenneth C. Hawk. He's connected with the Stevens Ministry. So we'll continue through this book, and as we have been, I'll read a chapter and then perhaps propose a question or something to reflect on. And then there'll be some space for you to do that reflection, either internally or externally. So as we start, and you've gathered what you need around you, and you've found a comfortable space, I invite you to take a couple of deep breaths and check in with your body, check in with your spirit, and maybe think back on today or this week, or maybe even notice just right now, where have you been in your grief journey? Where are you right now in your grief journey? What have been the sights and feelings along the way? So take a few moments now to do that. A couple of deep breaths and check in. We continue this week where we left off last week with chapter 11, titled Find Coping Methods That Are Right for You. Coping methods are activities that give us an outlet for some of our emotional and physical energy, help us get in touch with our thoughts and feelings, and begin to restore just a little bit of balance to our lives. Keeping a journal is one of the more common coping activities. One woman told me that sometimes no one seemed to want to listen to her, so she'd write instead. Writing allowed her to keep her feelings flowing and to record cherished memories. A man told me that whenever he felt stuck, he would look back at his journal and he could see how far he had really come. Yet journaling isn't for everyone. Another woman told me, everyone said to try journaling. I did it and it didn't work for me. I just sat there and stared at a blank piece of paper. So she found other coping methods that worked better for her. No one activity will do the trick for everybody, so you need to find which ones work best for you. In addition to journaling, here are some other coping activities people have told me about. Music. Find tapes or CDs that you enjoy, or perhaps that your loved one enjoyed, and listen to them. Or sing, play, or compose music if you have gifts in that area. Artwork. Draw, doodle, paint, knit, carve, do woodworking. Creative activities can be a wonderful outlet in your grief. Meditation, prayer, and scripture. Some people find it helpful to light a candle, perhaps play some soft music, and sit quietly to meditate or pray, or to read from the Bible or a devotional book. Write letters. People have told me how healing it was to write letters to God or to their deceased loved one, letters they saved in a notebook or even read at the gravesite. Some wrote letters to other living people. Whether or not they actually sent them, the act of writing helped them express their feelings. Exercise. Physical activities, jogging, walking, biking, swimming, hiking, golf, tennis, basketball, weightlifting, aerobics, help many people work off excess energy and clear their minds. Physical exercise generates chemicals in our bodies that help us to feel better so we can cope with our loss. Talk to your doctor before starting a new exercise regime. Scream. This may sound silly, but some people find it therapeutic to scream in the shower, into a pillow, in their car, or in a parking lot near an airport as planes take off or land overhead. The release of pent-up emotional energy can be freeing. Read. Some grieving people can't sit still long enough to read more than a few pages at a time, while others can bury themselves in books. Some read extensively about the topic of grief, while others read novels or magazines to take a break from their grief. Talk. Talking about your feelings is one of the best ways to work through them. Find a friend, family member, pastor, caregiver, support group, or someone else you can talk to. A number of people have told me they sometimes even talk out loud to their deceased loved one. That's perfectly okay too, if it's helpful to you. This is just a beginning list. You may think of other activities that are just right for you. You'll probably find that the coping methods that work best for you will involve activities you've enjoyed in the past. For example, if you've always liked to write, you may find that journaling works well for you. If you've enjoyed walking or jogging, you may find those activities most helpful. As time goes on, you may also discover that your coping activities change. What wasn't helpful early on may be very soothing later. For example, many people find putting together a scrapbook of photos and memories of the loved one is too painful to tackle early on, but very healing later in their grief. Let yourself be the judge. Do those activities that feel right for you and are most helpful at that time. If an activity works for you, is healthy, doesn't endanger you or someone else, then do it. Coping methods can be very effective ways to let loose of the energy and feelings that build up during your grief. A couple of questions to reflect on, perhaps. What are the coping methods that have worked best for you or that have felt the best to you? When was the last time you did one of those? And maybe another question, what's a coping method that you haven't tried but you're interested in trying? Here's a quote from James Miller. Whatever method you choose, find a way to allow your feelings to move from within yourself to outside yourself. We'll take a few more moments of silence for reflection. Continuing on now, chapter 12. If God seems far away. I don't know where you are with your faith since the death of your loved one. Grief affects our relationship with God too, sometimes in ways we never expected. Some people find that they draw closer to God during grief than they've ever been before. One grieving man told me, "My faith was the only thing that made sense in a time when nothing else did. God's presence was the one thing I could count on. It's the only way I was able to get through this terribly dark time." But I've also seen the opposite. People who had been pillars of faith were so devastated by the death of a loved one that it shook them to their foundations. One woman who lost 3 loved ones in a car accident said, "What have I done wrong? How could God let this happen? Their deaths have torn apart everything I've ever believed." I've been in both places at various times, and a lot of places in between. There's so much I don't know, but I've come to know and believe a few things with all my heart. Whether God seems near or far or somewhere in between right now, I share these thoughts in the hope that they may be of some help and comfort to you. Here's a quote by Joey O'Connor. If there is a wide gulf between your faith and feelings right now because of the hurt and pain you are feeling, that's not hypocrisy, that's honesty. The first thing I know is that it's crucial for us to be ourselves with God. For example, pretending not to be angry at God when we really are doesn't fool God or help ourselves. So whether you're angry or at peace, whether you feel God is close or that God has abandoned you, admit it, say it, feel it. That's where you are. That's real. Always be real with God. It's the way God can be real with you. Tell God what you truly feel. If you want to ask God some difficult questions, ask them. If you have serious doubts about what God is doing or even whether God exists, go ahead and express your doubts. Don't worry that God may get angry at you. God never turns away from the people who open their hearts and speak honestly. If you doubt that, just read a few of the Psalms. The writers of these poems, prayers, and songs said exactly what they felt. If they did, so can you. Don't mistake feeling abandoned by God for being abandoned by God. Great men and women of faith have felt abandoned by God at times, yet everyone else saw that God was alive in them. Mother Teresa, who worked among the poorest of the poor in Calcutta, wrote in her journal, I feel just that terrible pain of loss, of God not wanting me, of God not being God, of God not really existing. These words were written by a woman who had devoted her whole life to serving God. The greatest example is Jesus, who, as he was dying on the cross, cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" So if you also feel that terrible pain of loss, you're in very good company, God's company. Finally, in some mysterious way, God grieves and suffers with you. I say mysterious because I can't explain how it works. God's ways are not our ways. Yet God has entered our lives in his Son, Jesus, and Jesus was all about helping those who suffer. Jesus cared deeply for people whose hearts were broken by sorrow. When you cry, Jesus cries. Your tears are his tears, your pain, his pain. This is a total mystery to me, but I believe it. God doesn't take away our pain, but shares it. That's the way God's love works. That's why every person who truly deeply shares the pain of your grief with you is doing God's work. Here's a quote from John Claypool. What God does is not always immediately evident to human eyes. And a quote by Max Lucado. Stand still and whisper God's name and listen. He is nearer than you think. The woman whose faith was devastated after she lost 3 loved ones later told me, it took a long time, but I began to see that God really was there. He was just very different from the God I had pictured before. He was more real, more comforting, and I discovered he had been with me all along. Before the accident, after the accident, today and always. No matter how long it takes, I hope you experience God in this way too. At the end of that chapter, I invite you to reflect on what has your relationship with God been like? Where are you at with God? Or how are you relating with God at this point? That's the end of that first book. I don't have that book on hand except my copy in my office, but I can get a copy for you. If you found that book helpful and you'd like to have your own copy, please let me know. We're going to begin a new book in the same series, the second book, again by Kenneth Hawk, who was the founder and director of Stephen Ministries. This is called Experiencing Grief. And it begins with Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This is the introduction to this book, A Note to You. A friend told me how the finality of his wife's death sank in for the first time. It was a few months later. I was at the store and it dawned on me I was alone. My wife wasn't coming back. Everyone else was going on as if life was normal. All I could think was, how can you act like nothing happened? My wife is dead. Life can never be normal again. I walked out, got into my car, and cried. Maybe you've had a similar experience. People around you are living as if everything is normal, but everything is not normal for you. Your loved one is gone, your world turned upside down, and the pain may sometimes seem unbearable. I hope this second Journeying Through Grief book will shed a little light on your journey and bring you bits of comfort and encouragement along the way. May God surround you with his loving presence. And we'll finish here with the first chapter. I never knew it could hurt so much. I never knew so many strong feelings would churn inside me. I'm overwhelmed, I'm confused, I'm angry, I'm lonely, I'm hurting. Part of my heart has been ripped away. How will I survive this? How long will it hurt, God? How long will it hurt? Chapter 1, When the Loss Sinks In. There comes a point in grief, and it varies with each person, when the magnitude of the loss finally sinks in. Your loved one really did die. He or she is not coming back. This is a time when you may be feeling very bad. But the fact that you feel that way isn't all bad, because it means that you are feeling. Early in grief, we typically experience shock. The loss is so painful, so overwhelming that our hearts find it hard to accept. For a while, this shields us from some of the pain, but try as we may, we can't change what's happened or keep holding off the full impact of the loss. Sooner or later, we give in to the overwhelming reality that our loved one is indeed gone. And with that reality comes pain. A mother grieving the loss of her baby said, "The hole in my soul was so deep that I couldn't see the bottom." You also may feel as if you can't see the bottom, or perhaps as if you've hit rock bottom. At times, you may wonder if you can survive, or even want to survive, without your loved one. But you can and will survive. The pain you feel right now will not always be as intense and will not last forever. The pain will come and go. It will throb at times, but gradually lessen as you work your way through your grief. What will remain is the bond of love you have with your loved one. He or she will always be a part of your life. Let the reality of your loss sink in, as painful as that reality may be. You can only heal what you feel. Experiencing the feelings your loss has stirred up is one step toward healing. Here's a quote by Alan Wolfelt. Perhaps the most important truth I have learned is that healing in grief is heart-based, not head-based. invite you to take a few moments, a few deep breaths to reflect on that chapter. No particular questions, just reflection. Some things I invite you to remember is that grief is different for different people, and it's even different depending on many factors through a person's life. So be kind to yourself, give yourself permission to be where you are. Also, if we were here together, we would do some taking care of each other. I invite you to take care of yourself. Notice in this moment what you need, what your body needs, what your spirit needs, and treat it to that. And I also invite you to express, find a way to express this through movement or writing or speaking or art or music. If you need to talk, as always, call me or email. Reach out to each other. There are many of you out there that have experienced grief or are experiencing grief. If your spirit and body need to stay in this moment a bit longer, then let them do that. But if you are transitioning into what's next in your day, take a few moments to stretch or move or find a good way to transition, to set this aside and head into the rest of your day. I'm glad that you joined, and we will continue with the book next week. God bless you in the meantime.